Part B, being. The term being means thing, reality. It means anything that exists or can be thought of as existing. The Latin term for being is the coined word ens. Ens has a strength that is lacking in the English term being. Perhaps this is because ens is coined, for it would be the present participle of the Latin verb esse, to be, if that verb had a present participle, which, as a matter of fact, it has not, and is not a term in constant current use as the English being is. Ens is used exclusively and precisely in a philosophical sense as a noun, whereas being is used in our casual daily speech both as noun and as participle. In the present study, however, we use being as a noun to indicate thing or state. The Latin ens is the etymological source of the English entity. The term being, like every term, is the expression of an idea or concept. Now, as we have seen in discussing the logical question, an idea has a content or makeup called its comprehension, and a field of meaning, of denotation, called its extension. We have also seen that ideas in point of extension are in themselves universal, although they may be contracted to the character of particular and singular ideas. A universal idea expresses in the mind some one thing, that is, some one essence, which is found in each and every member of the extension of the idea. Therefore, the universal idea is predicable of all and each of these members, called inferiors or subjects of the idea. There are 5 possible modes of predication: vis-a-vis, generic, specific, differential, proper, accidental. Usually these are called simply genus, species, difference, property, accident. Every universal idea will be predicable of its inferiors in one of these 5 ways. Now, when we regard the idea of being as a universal idea, that is, as representing in the mind some one thing, some one essence that is common to all its inferiors, we find that there is simply nothing conceivable which is absent from the scope or extension of the idea being. But how does it apply to its inferiors? How is it predicable of them? Certainly not as accident, property, or difference, and certainly not as species. For these are restricted classifications of a way or mode of predication, and as we have just noted, there is absolutely no restriction in the mode in which being is predicated of its inferiors, for it not only applies to all, but to their differences and particularities as well. Everything is a being. Every difference of things is a being. Every special character is a being. Every conceivable thing is a being. Is the one classification left, that is, the genus, the mode of predication, proper to being? Not precisely, for a genus is, after all, predicable of a class of inferiors, and there are boundaries of that class, and things outside those boundaries to which the genus does not apply or of which it is not predicable. This is not the case with being. Hence the idea being does not apply to its inferiors as a genus. But we have said that every universal idea must apply to its inferiors in one of the 5 ways called the predicables. Being does not so apply. Therefore, being is not a universal idea. It is more. It is a transcendental idea. It soars above all classifications and is predicable of everything. But since genus is the most wide of the modes of predication, we may say that being, in its application to inferiors, is closer to genus than to any of the other 4 predicables. And so, loosely speaking, we say being is a sort of genus, or a genus by figure of speech. In short, we say being is a genus by analogy, or that being is an analogical genus. What we have said of the idea of being is to be said as well of the term being. It is a transcendental term, not merely a universal term. It applies to its inferiors, terms that can be used as subject when it is predicate, as an analogical genus. Being is understood by the mind as contrasted with its opposite, that is, non-being or nothing. For as the eye cannot behold a visible object exactly unless it stand against a contrasting background, so the mind cannot see being except against the background of non-being or nothingness. And the mind sees, even as it grasps being, as necessarily contradictory to non-being, that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time and in the same way. This judgment the mind inevitably pronounces as a self-evident certitude and truth. This is the fundamental first principle, the first of self-evident truths, which serves as root reason and solid basis for every other judgment. This self-evident truth, this principle, that is, this guiding truth, is called the principle of contradiction. Out of the idea of being, then, which is the very first idea in the order of time and in the order of thinking, since our first grasp of anything is as a thing, comes at once the judgment which is enunciated as the principle of contradiction. Further analysis of the idea being makes evident other principles. For after seeing that a thing cannot be and not be in the same way and simultaneously, the mind sees that the classifications of being and non-being are all inclusive, and it necessarily judges anything either is or it is not. There is no middle ground between being and non-being. This judgment, so enunciated, is called the principle of the excluded middle. Again, the mind, contemplating the idea being as contrasted with non-being or nothing, corroborates its finding by asserting the identity of being and the identity of non-being. Thus, whatever is, and that which is not. This is the principle of identity. Finally, the mind, dwelling still on the idea of being as seen in contrast with its opposite, judges with inevitable and absolute certitude that these opposites are different. Thus, that which is not that which is not, nor can that which is not be identified with that which is. This is the principle of difference. Thus, the mind, studying the idea of being and contrasting it with the idea of non-being, sees these self-evident truths, that a thing cannot be both of the opposites simultaneously, that the opposites exhaust the possibilities, leaving no middle ground which is neither, that each is what it is, that either is not the other. These self-evident truths are primal, basic, fundamental to all thinking. They are the root of every proof, of every sound thinking process and its fruitage. They are called first principles, that is, first intellectual principles, first guiding truths. Their names, to review them, are the principle of contradiction, the principle of the excluded middle, the principle of identity, and the principle of difference. Of these, the very first is the principle of contradiction. Part C is forthcoming.